Good evening. Thanks for joining us. Today, a former police officer finally in court more than 6 months after his own body camera showed him beating a pedestrian as an outraged community accuses the department of a cover-up. ABC's Steve Osunsami has the story, and we warn you, some of the footage you're about to see may be disturbing.
Damn, y'all ain't got to do besides harass somebody about walking.
A late summer night in Asheville, North Carolina. What starts with an argument over jaywalking, yes, jaywalking, is about to turn into a police beatdown. The lives of these three men about to change forever.
Put your hands behind your back. Do not. Stop, drop the bag.
Former officer Chris Hickman, who's wearing a body camera, is seen running after Johnny Rush, an unarmed black man on his way home from work. You hear Hickman promise to beat him good.
You know what's funny is you're going to get hardcore.
In the video, first published by the Citizens-Times newspaper just last week, Hickman is seen pushing Rush's face into the asphalt during the incident last August, while another white officer, trainee Verino Ruggiero, is watching.
I can't, man. I can't breathe. I can't breathe.
As Rush is telling them he can't breathe, Hickman is seen shooting Rush with his taser. When the police supervisor arrives, you see the former officer tell her his side of the story.
Tried to drag the taser out of my hand, and then I just went on his head.
Police say the supervisor, seen here, has been disciplined because after she heard this story, they say she failed to go compare it with the body camera video that evening, which is standard procedure.
The supervisor dropped the ball on the response to that and was disciplined as a result.
The most egregious part of this video is the fact that because of a jaywalking citation, that this person was beat, tased, and verbally disrespected by a police officer, sworn to protect people.
Today in court, Chris Hickman got to feel what it's like on the other end of the law. Mugshot included. After resigning in January, he's now facing criminal charges, assault by strangulation, a felony, and 2 misdemeanors, assault inflicting serious injury and communicating threats. Why it took 6 months since the incident to file charges in this case has caused outrage.
When they fail to disclose, when they fail to acknowledge that something bad has happened, it only makes us trust them less, and that only makes crime increase across the board.
This is not about police brutality. This is about a system that's brutalizing us all the way through.
Asheville Police Chief Tammy Hooper had to face her community and answer tough questions at this meeting a few nights ago.
Do you plan to resign based on the handling of this situation?
The whole thing is bad. When I watch the video, I have the same reaction as probably you did when you watched it. It's just a terrible, egregious case. The whole reason around the stop to begin with was just a bad thing from start to finish.
She's even offered to resign if it would help. Adding to the fire, the video only became public after it was leaked to the press.
You won't respect, you get it.
In September, after watching the video behind closed doors, the district attorney moved to drop the jaywalking and trespassing charges against Rush. But it wasn't until January, 5 months after the incident, that a criminal investigation was launched against Officer Hickman.
The police chief immediately should have held herself accountable in explaining the failures to first view the tape and take immediate action. The witness officer who has not been held accountable, there needs to be a public statement on what types of things are going to happen to the officer who witnessed this and kept their mouth shut. This blue line of silence needs to be broken in our departments.
Now there are more accusations coming forward against the former officer. Another Asheville resident says she filed a complaint against him last summer after an incident involving her 15-year-old grandson.
I heard him using profane language, cursing. I said he need to go to sensitivity training. Say I don't want no apology from him, because he sounds racist.
She's not alone. A memo released earlier this week shows 4 instances where Hickman, quote, displayed discourteous and rude conduct to members of the public.
I do think that at least the majority of them involved African-American citizens, but I can't say that they were racially motivated.
For many, this incident feels like so many others. Between white officers and black civilians, they're assigned to serve and protect, an echo of far too many others.
Growing outrage over the deadly police shootings of 2 black men.
Police officer charged with opening fire and killing an unarmed former college football player.
In the summer of 2014, Eric Garner was killed after being placed in a chokehold by a New York City officer.
I'm minding my business, officer.
He had been stopped for allegedly selling loose cigarettes.
I'm minding my business. Please just leave me alone.
And his haunting final words.
I can't breathe. I can't breathe.
I can't breathe. I can't breathe.
Repeated in Asheville.
I can't breathe.
The New York officer was never indicted by a grand jury, though he still faces federal civil rights charges. A month later, 18-year-old Michael Brown was killed in Ferguson, Missouri by Officer Darren Wilson. A grand jury refused to indict him, and a federal investigation led to no prosecution, though Brown's family settled with the city for $1.5 million. And in 2015 in Baltimore, 25-year-old Freddie Gray was killed while riding around unsecured in the back of a police van. After a jury trial and a federal investigation, those 6 officers were never held criminally responsible. Those deaths, along with so many others, set off protests across the country, raising a national conversation on policing and a system that seems to treat people of color differently.
Well, historically, the policing institution arose from out of slave catchers.
For Lieutenant Yolanda Williams of the San Francisco Police Department, the problem in the police force runs deep.
So that in and of itself is the foundation of the biases and the institutional biases that exist within the police department is just a kamikaze.
Even though she's a 30-year-plus veteran of the police force, she told my colleague Juju Chang that she understands the mistrust that widely exists in her own community.
When you're not in uniform and you see blue lights behind you and you get pulled over,
my heart stops, and I all of a sudden find myself in a situation of wondering, what did I do? Okay, keep my hands at the steering wheel. Don't move. There's something wrong. Majorly wrong.
As an officer, she's been working to change things on the inside and says that lives lost in police encounters is leading to great change.
Their lives, though, have not been in vain, because what has happened in those incidents has changed many policies and procedures and law enforcement, and it's made us be far more accountable for our actions. And you're seeing it in policy changes, procedural changes. We can't even use the carotid restraint anymore. So that's off the books completely.
But there are too many others, faces who may not have made the news. In these cases, many of the officers who killed them weren't convicted and went free. In this case, the disturbing video has led to Officer Hickman being arrested.
It is a sign of progress that they're starting to be charged, but the problem is that's not justice. We're not in a world of justice. Justice is not prosecuting police officers for killing us. It's a world where police officers see us as worthy of living in the first place.
It was the video that changed the story and shed more light on the truth. But even pictures that are as clear as day don't always mean that justice wins. For Nightline, I'm Steve Osunsami in Atlanta.